What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. One of the hosts of the podcast, my name is Kyle Dabro. So in this video, we're going to go over our NFL Week 11 power rankings. So now that Week 11 in the NFL is finished and over with, we're going to go over the top 10 teams as I currently see it in the NFL at this current moment in time. Very similar to what we've done in the past. Start with the number 10 team and then work our way down to the number 1 team when it's all said and done. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into these power rankings and let's start with the number 10 team. So number 10, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Colts put an absolute beatdown on the Buffalo Bills this past weekend, beating them by the score of 41-15. And this was one of the most impressive performances that you're going to see from any NFL team this entire season. Jonathan Taylor for the Colts was an absolute monster in that game against the Bills. Had 5 total touchdowns. 4 of them came on the ground. And he also had a receiving touchdown as well. He scored every touchdown for Indianapolis in that game. And I thought the game plan going into that game from Frank Reich was a good one. The weather was a factor in that game. It was raining for most of the game, and they just gave Jonathan Taylor and pounded the rock the entire day, and it worked to their good fortune. He had over 180 yards rushing and single-handedly dismantled that Buffalo defense. The Colts have been on a pretty good stretch right now. They're now over 500 with a 6-5 record. And this upcoming weekend, they are playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is going to be a big test for them moving forward. But they do get to play the Bucs at home, and this will definitely show the NFL whether or not that they're a legitimate force in the AFC moving forward if they can pull off a win against the Bucs in this Week 12 matchup. But the Colts are on a really good stretch right now. And after that win against Buffalo, I think it put the AFC, and to a larger extent, the NFL on notice. And that's why I have them at number 10. So number 9, I have the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens beat the Bears by the score of 16-13 in Week 11. Now, Lamar Jackson was not in this game. He had been dealing with some sort of non-COVID illness. Probably was dealing with either a cold or some sort of a flu. But either way, the Ravens were able to get past Chicago in this game. Granted, it wasn't in the most convincing fashion. It doesn't help when you don't have Lamar Jackson in the fold, but still, being able to go on the road without your starting quarterback to get a big win in that regard, I got to give them credit for that. Now, granted, the Ravens are still really dependent on Lamar Jackson when he's actually in the game. And really, this team, it's going to be dependent on how he plays moving forward. If Lamar doesn't have a good game, more likely than not, the Ravens are at a better chance of losing the game. But if he has a great game, it's the opposite. They have a very good chance to win those games. So I would like to see more of an emphasis on the run game rather than just Lamar single-handedly carrying that offense. But, time will tell as far as what Baltimore's future is going to look like, just as far as their offensive capabilities go. And they do play the Browns in Week 12. I would imagine that Lamar Jackson will be back in the fold for that game. It's still a very good team to contend with in the AFC. They are at the top of the AFC North, and I think at this point they're on the track to possibly winning the division overall, but they can't really slip up right here. They can't really afford a loss to the Browns in Week 12. Overall, good win against the Bears, and that's why I have them at number 9 in our power rankings. So number 8, I have the Tennessee Titans. The Titans lost to the Texans 22-13 last week, and this was probably one of the most atrocious performances from the Titans the entire season. They've been a very good team since the start of the season, and I thought last week that they were a legitimate Super Bowl contender after they had a great performance last week. Well, they followed it up this week with probably a top 5 worst performance from any NFL team this entire season. I mean, Ryan Tannehill in that game against Houston threw 4 interceptions. You can't have that. In no way, shape, or form can you have that. Houston is not that good of a football team. I understand that they're a divisional rival in the AFC South, but still, for what I was considering a Super Bowl contender, you cannot take an L at home to Houston. It's just an unacceptable loss. Granted, their defense didn't play too bad. They only gave up 22 points, and that's despite the fact that Tannehill threw 4 interceptions. So this was a game that they probably should have won and should have continued their winning streak, but it does come to an end. And for this week upcoming for the Titans, it does not get easy. They have to travel to New England. They play the Patriots on Sunday. And with the way that the Patriots have been playing the last month and a half or so, it's going to be a much more competitive game than I think the Titans were probably thinking maybe a month ago when the Patriots were under 500. So the Titans are going to need an A game on the road against the Patriots next week to get back on track. I mean, I had them as high as number 2 last week in our power rankings, and they slipped all the way down to 8 because I just think that loss against Houston is just unacceptable. There's no other way around it. And, that's why I have them at number 8. So number 7, I have the New England Patriots. Now, New England played the Falcons on the Thursday night game in Week 11 and absolutely destroyed them, beating them by the score of 25-0. When I look at the Patriots overall, they're rounding into form at a good time. Defensively, they have really stepped up as of late. In the last 3 games, they've only allowed 13 points as a unit. That is just phenomenal, any way, shape, or form. Now, when it comes to the offense has been hit or miss. When they played the Browns 2 weeks ago, they looked phenomenal. And it looked like nobody could stop them. But against the Falcons definitely presented them a different type of challenge because I thought New England in the first half, they played pretty well against Atlanta, but Atlanta made some good defensive adjustments in the second half, and they really limited that Patriot offense led by Mac Jones. So, going up against the Titans, this is going to be an interesting matchup for New England because it's either the offense is going to show up or they might show up for like 2 quarters. We haven't really seen them consistently have a great performance offensively throughout the entirety of the game. They'll play great for maybe a quarter or 2, but they may slack off in a quarter or 2 as well. Overall, I mean, the Patriots are on a really good stretch. Like I said, 5-game winning streak. But, that Titans matchup is going to be a good one at home. And if the Patriots do win that game against the Titans, an argument would have to be brought up on whether or not that they are actually the best team in the AFC at this current moment in time. You could say the Chiefs are right alongside with them and the Titans as well. But a good performance against the Titans and possibly a win, I think, would definitely raise an argument about the Patriots being one of the best teams, if not the best team in the AFC. So it should definitely be a good game against the Titans, and that's why I have them at number 7 at this current moment in time. So at number 6, I have the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams were on a bye week in Week 11, but prior to their bye week, they had lost their last 2 games in a row to the Titans and the 49ers. And in those games against both of those teams, they looked bad. There's no other way to say it. And when I look at the offense, I'm specifically looking at Matt Stafford. Stafford has to be better than what he's been the last 2 games. And I understand, look, mistakes happen. And he has been turnover prone the last 2 games, but he cannot afford another pick 6 in his 3rd straight game. Just because when you're doing that, you're just setting the team behind the 8 ball and you're playing catch up the entire way throughout, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarters. You just can't have that. So the Rams definitely need to get back on track with a win here. But I'm going to be honest, it's not going to be easy. They had to play the Green Bay Packers this weekend. And the Packers, granted, they're coming off of a pretty close loss to the Vikings, so I imagine the Packers are looking to get back on track next week as well. But there's a very good chance that the Rams could actually lose their 3rd straight. So the Rams are going to need a really good performance, not only from their offense, but their defense, because their defense the last couple weeks has been suspect. They got destroyed by the 49ers. And in that game, the 49ers controlled the pace of the game from beginning to end. They owned the line of scrimmage, which is kind of crazy to say because they have both Aaron Donald and Von Miller in that front line defensively. But it didn't stop the 49ers from absolutely rolling over them. And I thought Jimmy G had a really good game against that secondary as well. So going up against Aaron Rodgers, going up against the former MVP from last year, you got Devontae Adams back more than likely. You're going to have Marcus Valdez-Scantling to deal with. And then you got A.J. Dillon in the backfield. So this is going to be a pretty tough matchup for the Rams. They're going to have to get it together, and they're going to have to get it together quick. But that's why I have them at number 6. So at number 5, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs defeated the Cowboys 19-9 in their Week 11 matchup. And when I look at the Chiefs, it wasn't the most impressive performance offensively from them. But a win is a win. And I think the biggest standout from this game against the Cowboys for me was their defense. Their defense was phenomenal against Dallas from the beginning of the game all the way to the end of it. And it looks like that defense has finally started to get it together. They are getting a pass rush. Now they are committing turnovers on the opposing offense. And if you combine that with what the offense can do, just because the offense of late has been struggling. I mean, they had a great game against the Raiders back in week 10, but once again, just that offense has been sputtering of late outside of that Raiders game. And I thought that the Chiefs would have had a better offensive performance against the Cowboys, but really the standout was their defense. And you got to give their defense, you got to give their defensive coordinator a lot of credit, because it looked like a couple weeks ago that this team was dead in the water defensively. But Steve Spagnuolo has done a great job with this defensive unit of late, and he's really rounded that unit into form the last month or so when they've been on this 4-game win streak. So, good win against the Chiefs. Good win against the Cowboys, excuse me. And the Chiefs are looking to extend their win streak to 5 straight games when they play the Broncos in Week 12. Should be a favorable matchup for them. But I have the Chiefs at number 5. I got to give them that spot after beating the Cowboys, who were one of the best teams coming into Week 11 before that game took place. So number 4, I have the Dallas Cowboys. So I just talked about the Cowboys a little bit, but the Cowboys lost to the Chiefs 19-9. Overall, in Week 11, I just thought it was a bad performance from Dallas overall. Part of it had to do with the fact that the Cowboys didn't have Amari Cooper in that game because of COVID, and CeeDee Lamb left the game right before halftime with a head injury. And offensively, when you lose those two dynamic pieces in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, really tough for that offense to kind of get any sort of momentum going. And like I mentioned with KC's defense, I thought KC's defense did a really good job containing Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. It's just Dallas did not win that line of scrimmage battle. They just didn't win in the trenches, and they weren't able to establish the ground game throughout the entirety of the game. And I think moving forward, I'm not too worried about the Cowboys offensively, just because, they'll be able to get Amari Cooper back. CeeDee Lamb should be able to return fairly quickly. I don't know if he's going to be available for this game that they have in Week 12, but I do believe that they will be able to get back on track pretty soon. So they play the Las Vegas Raiders on Thanksgiving, and I imagine if they win that game, they'll be fine. I don't really see a scenario where it's doom and gloom for the Cowboys, since they lost one game to the Chiefs. So it's a tough loss against the Chiefs, but I still am of the mindset that they are a top 5 team in the NFL, and that's why I have them at number 4. So number 3, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Bucs handily defeated the Giants on the Monday night matchup in Week 11, beating them by the score of 30-10. The Bucs were good against the Giants, but I'm still of the mindset that there's still room for improvement for this team. I think that the red zone efficiency for the offense should improve with Rob Gronkowski back in the lineup. And defensively, I think they're starting to get healthier at a good time. Sean Murphy-Bunting is now back in the rotation for their secondary. And really the only holdout as far as injuries go on the defensive side of the ball is Richard Sherman. And I imagine we would probably see him at some point in time within probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. And if they're able to integrate him back into the secondary to combine it with Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean, you also have Antoine Winfield Jr. It's going to be a good secondary moving forward. And I think as they transition into this last third of the season, I think they'll be fine moving forward. So really the key factor for Tampa moving forward for that next month and a half is health and availability. And if they're able to keep their roster fairly healthy moving forward, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be one of the best teams in the NFL when it's all said and done. Now, Tampa does travel to Indianapolis to play the Colts next week, which on paper looks to be a fantastic matchup. So I think they're definitely going to need an A game from Tom. And also they're going to need a pretty solid performance from their rush defense, because they're going up against an absolute monster in Jonathan Taylor. And I imagine that Jonathan Taylor is going to present them some problems if that offensive line from the Colts wins the line of scrimmage. So that'll be a fantastic game as far as I'm concerned. And The Bucs definitely have a good shot to win that one, but Indianapolis is definitely going to be a formidable foe against them. But all in all, the Bucs are a very good team, and that's why I have them at number 3. So number 2, I have the Green Bay Packers. The Packers lost a shootout of a game against the Vikings last week, losing by the score of 34-31. It was just a tough loss. And even though that the Packers lost this game, I thought they did enough to win. It's just defensively, they got torched. I mean, they allowed Kirk Cousins to torch that defense pretty much the entire day. I thought Justin Jefferson as well was able to torch their secondary as well. And that was despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers had a phenomenal game, threw 4 touchdowns and had almost 400 yards passing. And I'm still of the mindset that the Packers are a very good team. They're at the top of the NFC North by a mile. And I mean, look, they're the number 2 team in our power rankings. It's just when I dive into this team specifically on the defense, as a unit, they went 2 months without having a bad performance. So I guess they might have been overdue for one in that regard. But, they got to tighten some things up. They're going to look back at the film, and they're definitely going to see some of the holes that were exploited by Kirk Cousins and that Vikings offense in that loss. But I'm still of the mindset that the Packers are a very good football team. And look, sometimes you lose a shootout. And the Vikings were able to get the ball at the last second, and that really kind of made the difference. So not much you could do about that. And I imagine that the Packers are going to get back on track when they play against the Bears next week. So I'm not too worried about the Packers moving forward. And that's why I have them at number 2. And at number 1, they reclaimed the number 1 spot once again, and that is the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals defeated the Seahawks last week by the score of 23-13. Like I said, they reclaimed that number 1 spot. And that's despite the fact that Kyler Murray was not in this game for his 3rd straight game. He's still dealing with that ankle issue that he suffered in that loss to the Packers almost a month ago. But still, the Cardinals are just finding ways to win. And this is a divisional battle. And the Seahawks needed to win this game to stay somewhat relevant in the NFC playoff picture. But they got a good performance from Colt McCoy to stifle that Seahawks defense. And I thought defensively, you're able to contain Russell Wilson in that Seahawks offense to 13 points on the road. That's a phenomenal performance from Arizona. So I give Arizona a lot of credit. Now, they've been dealing with some injury issues on the offensive side of the ball of late, specifically to Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and AJ Green. But when you get James Conner pretty solid in the rotation in their backfield, Zach Ertz had a phenomenal game against the Seahawks, and Colt McCoy has stepped in admirably since Kyler has been dealing with this ankle injury. So I got to give Arizona a lot of credit for being able to roll with the punches with their injuries and maintain one of the best records they actually have. They have the best record in the NFL at 9-2 at this current moment in time. So a great win for Arizona. They get back to that number 1 spot, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with moving forward once Kyler Murray gets back into the starting role for them moving forward. So good win from Arizona, and that's why I have them at number 1. So with that said, you guys, that'll wrap it up from me. If you guys like the video, hit that like button below. If you guys want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, hit that subscribe button below. Any sort of support that we can get for the channel, Kevin and I definitely appreciate it. Once again, just thank you guys for tuning in to watch the video, and we'll see you guys later.